as I was saying, thank you everyone for coming today. This is part of the iConnect program, and we're here to give you some important information, just-in-time information for our international students as we are preparing to, get to the final stages of the semester. We also gonna have two guests that are joining us today. I'm really excited to have Emma Pierce and Catherine Hewitt here with me to talk about self-care and give us some, share with us some resources and some suggestions on how we can manage everything that is happening in our lives right now. And at the end, hopefully we'll have more time to just kind of, have a conversation with each other, see how we're doing. So let's start with those ISSS updates. So one of the things that we all have in mind as we are moving into the Thanksgiving break is what are our international students going to do in the winter break concerning housing, right? And if you can, if you're able to, you can use the chat as well. Share with us if you are still wondering what you're gonna do for housing during the winter break, or if you already found housing for the winter break. So you can use the chat, or, but I know that in conversations with other students, some international students are still trying to figure out what they're gonna do for housing. So Jessie is gonna share with you a link to information that Residence Live share with us concerning some of the options that international students have concerning winter housing. We also gonna share with you a link to a document that our very talented student assistant Martin created for students, and it's just a list of some suggestions on how to find temporary housing for the winter. And of course, if any of you find yourselves in kind of an emergency situation of losing housing, or you had planned to travel and your travel was canceled given to the pandemic, if you find yourself in any type of those situations where you don't know what to do, definitely reach out to us. Let us know what type of assistance you need. But again, these are some of the resources that you can tap into as you make your plans for the winter break. The other kind of topic that I wanted to cover was spring registration. Some of you are asking us, do I need to register for an in-person course? What are the new guidelines for the spring semester? As of today and as of right now, the same guidelines that applied for the fall will apply for the spring. We haven't received any new guidance from the Department of Homeland Security in terms of what are the requirements of in-person courses for international students. So we are moving into the spring with the understanding that the fall guidelines still apply, which means that you can still register for all online courses if you need to, especially if you are studying remotely outside the US. That is still the case. As soon as we receive any new information, we'll let you know. And finally, Jessie has some quick information about I-20s if you are planning on traveling, or if you are gonna join us from outside the US in person this spring semester.
Okay, hey, it's me again. So I wanted to just ask you a quick question. How many of you are planning to travel during the winter break? Give me a Zoom reaction if you are.
You mean internationally or just domestically?
Internationally.
Okay.
Well, oh, okay. Well, personally, I think you guys make a very wise choice. I myself do not plan to travel internationally at all. Okay, so if you heard about your friends wanting to travel internationally, an international student friend, please let him know that read our winter break and spring guideline that we send out via the ISSS email, and make sure they understand all of those restrictions and immigration guidance before they plan for travel. Here, I also want to remind you that also about the spring guideline we send out. Please make sure you fill out the spring guideline Google form, the spring plan Google form to inform the ISSs that your plan for the spring semester, whether you are studying virtually outside the US or you continue to study in person in the US, or if you are taking a semester off during the spring semester, let us know. Let us know. It is very important. And there is a chance for us to meet here virtually. So any questions about your I-20s, F1 status, or the winter break spring guideline we sent out? Because every student has their own situation. So sometimes we send out a guideline, it's for general, and we try to develop guidelines for several groups that grouped in a specific situation, but we may not be able to cover all of your individual situations. So here is a chance for you to ask us questions.
If you cannot think of a question right now, but you think about it in the next few minutes, just put it on the chat and we'll get to it. As those questions are, coming to you, just put them in the chat. We'll have more time at the end of our meeting today to answer those questions. So if we don't have any questions, let's go ahead and welcome our conversation facilitators today. I'll let them introduce themselves and then let them kind of guide us into some of the conversations. This is going to be something that is very informal. And so, like I said, if you have a question, just let us know. If we cannot get to it right away, we'll get to it by looking at the chat. So Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to Dr. Rodriguez and for Jesse for having us here tonight. And thank you all for being here. And for those of you watching the recording, it's nice to see you or meet you. My name is Emma Fierce. I am the case manager at Trinity. I'm housed in the Dean of Students office. So upstairs, Coat Center, where Revolve is, that's where I work. Now I'm working at home. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. My job is working one-on-one with students and providing support in a lot of different ways. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys tonight about self-care and mental health support. Those are really big things right now.
And I'll go ahead and jump in. So my name is Catherine Hewitt, and I'm the wellness coordinator on the Trinity campus. Been working here about 5 years now. For the past few years, I've been housed in the counseling services suite, but I recently over the summer made a move into student involvement, just with trying to get more, well, the idea was to have more face-to-face time with you guys. And that happened a little differently than we all anticipated. But just like Miss Emma said, I am also working remotely. I am based in San Antonio, so still trying to keep up with all the health and wellness resources in and around town for sure. But yeah, just eager to be with you all. Thank you for having me. And I have spent a lot of time, I guess my main gig, so to speak, is helping our students out with holistic health education programs, as well as our employees. But most recently, I've been doing majority of work with COVID programming, just try to keep our community as safe as possible and thinking about how we can partner with students and employees to mitigate the spread and reduce the spread of COVID-19. And there's actually a couple of folks on the call who've been really helpful for me. So it's really awesome to see some familiar faces. But I brought some slides with me today, so I'll be glad to share those with the group and for those who will be tuning in later. So whenever we want to jump in with that, Dr. Laura, you just let me know.
We're ready.
Ready? Okay. All right, let me give it a whirl. I haven't had to lead too much from home, so bear with me here, but I'll try to bring it up for y'all. Okay. Does that look okay? Can everybody see? Okay, Jesse's giving me a thumbs up. I appreciate that. All right, wonderful. So today again, self-care is the main theme that we'll be focusing on, of course. And for me, a lot of that has to do with physical and mental health specifically. So we'll have a lot of different examples about, I guess, thinking about how cultural influences tie in with self-care. So I'll introduce that just briefly. But for me, the culture that I tend to look after, and Emma does as well, is just college health in general. So typically there's a lot of things that we see as common self-care issues or health issues with our students. And that either turns into facilitation opportunities, that turns into outreach with student groups, student organizations, which is why I'm in student involvement now. But also tying in some of that case management or just one-on-one health coaching that I would do, or referrals that Ms. Emma would do. So that's hopefully what we'll try to walk through some of those tips and resources today, and try to tie it back into the specific group and audience that we have. We're going to try our best and see how it goes. So, yeah. So thinking about a little bit of the context of this pretty cool group that we get to work with here tonight, just wanted to tie in, just for me specifically, I have a background in public health. So that's not just limited to college health populations, of course, but whether that be local or federal health initiatives, you know, and actually like doing all this work with COVID has actually broadened my approach and a lot of the context I have for how we're addressing a lot of very major big scale health issues. So here, just looking at some cultural influences and how they do tie into self-care practices. And essentially that can look different for different people. But there's a lot of underlying things in terms of health education and program planning, a lot of things that us as professionals need to be thinking about in terms of how are we making the greatest impact with our specific population, right? So in this particular case, we can have, we have cultural influences that, you know, can either help maintain or also could present some challenges in how health behaviors are maintained or not. So different examples here. So we have traditional beliefs or ideas, or collectivism, family and kinship ties. So any sort of cultural norming, or a lot of influences on every culture is different in thinking about how we understand health issues, how we kind of self-reflect on what those issues may be, and then how we figure out to make a plan to move forward to address some health issues. So, so a lot of these things can come into play for sure. It may also, again, relate back to how individuals, again, interpret conversations with healthcare providers, or think about what sort of medication or treatment they would consider, for example. So a lot of different things, again, play a role in not only program planning and things we had to think about for like our COVID campaign, for example, but also just kind of ongoing challenges that our students are faced with kind of on the daily, because it's not just academic challenges. We know this. So for college students, thinking about that as a culture that that Emma and I spent a lot of time thinking about is things like sleep issues, really having challenges jumping into physical activity routines, especially with our international students, have some challenges adjusting to campus dining. That can be so different for a lot of our students. Timing of meals. The list could be really, really long. So a lot of challenges, again, that we try to work with our students and figure out how to make a plan and move forward. But yeah, I think that's pretty much sums it up right there. So a lot to think about, basically. So first and foremost, just with, it's such a big picture, such a major issue with our college students, regardless of on-campus learners or remote learners, thinking about sleep challenges is, again, like a really big challenge or a barrier for our students to their academic success. So this is sort of a little bit negative, but I don't want to spend too much time focusing on these. But it's important to recognize that having sleep issues, whether they're behavioral or also, an official like medical diagnosis, for example, could interfere with concentration, affects mood, stress level, how folks are performing academically, how they're feeling physically, whether that ties into having higher risk of getting an illness, let's say. And also, a lot of times we see with our students, where the sleep schedule is off, and I know a lot of our international students will struggle or have struggled with time zone challenges. That's like 100% true. But some difficulties with, if your timing is off and your sleep schedule is off, maybe hungry at very odd times, things of that nature, or just may gravitate to maybe some unhealthy options just for what's available at that point in time. Or there's lots of different things to think about. But for this, these are just some things to kind of point out, that it's not just overall sleep and rest, that they have connections and challenges with a lot of other health issues per se. And okay, Dr. Laura just wrote, if you have any questions in the chat, 100% yes. So if you want to keep using the chat, we definitely can. One thing I wanted to pose to our students on the call, and hopefully folks will be picking this up later on, is there anything in your routine that you seem to find that works for you for your sleep routine? So if someone, if your friend comes to talk to you and to say, oh my gosh, I'm just so tired, which is like very common language, we all do it. But could you help that person? Could you say, you know what, I actually, tried laying down like a half hour earlier a couple nights a week, and that's made a huge difference. Or I like to make sure the temperature in my room is a certain number, so then that has helped me. So feel free to use the chat if there's anything in your environment or your routine that has helped with your sleep patterns, because there's a good chance that I'll probably check that off the list as we move forward. So I'll give you guys just a couple of seconds to see if anybody wants to put in some ideas. Oh, let's go back. Cheating. Oh, and that's Leroy in City Vista, by the way. Oh, Emma's chiming in. Guided sleep meditations. Yes. Yeah, we definitely, there's a lot of tools out there. We'll be able to share a few of those things. It's a great like wind down activity for folks who have like a lot going on mentally. It's kind of tricky to shut the brain off. I know a lot of people struggle with that. So meditation is a great thing to use. A couple more popping in the chat. Okay, stop doing my homework or studying an hour before. Excellent suggestion. Feel a sneeze coming in. We should be in advice prior. Okay, should not eat, right. Yeah, so cutting off technology at a certain time, actually as much as you can sort of before bed. So whether that's like 30 minutes to 60 minutes, I guess would be ideal, but I know sometimes that can be hard. Well, good, we have a couple suggestions, but just for time, I'm gonna keep moving forward here. A couple of tips to think about is having a consistent wake up time and lie down time. Sleep in total darkness. Yeah, so being able to make sure that your lighting is appropriate. That's definitely true. One less distraction, right? That's wonderful. Okay, so having a consistent wake up time and go to bed time. So typically this is Monday through Sunday. So every single day of the week, we want to try to keep it as consistent as possible. So, so I know with college students, right? So thinking about a lot of folks tend to sleep in on the weekends, and then, Monday is that much more challenging. So trying to wake up again and go to sleep around the same time within like an hour time frame. So if you normally wake up for like, regardless of time zone, say you're waking up at 9 a.m. your time. So you want to try to be awake at that time every day of the week, even if there's like a little bit of wiggle room, like 30 minutes, an hour or so. As long as you're kind of sticking with your routine, that's probably the most important thing you can do to help with your sleep. A couple other suggestions here: avoiding late night eating and alcohol, just things that stay in your system and your body is actively digesting those things. So it's just one physical thing your body is doing to help prevent you from sleeping. We mentioned screen time. That's definitely true. Talked a little bit about environment, whether that's temperature, lighting, bedding, all those considerations, making sure you have a really good pillow. Can't like stress that enough. That makes a huge difference. Other things to think about is limiting caffeine, and you know, whether that's time of day, whether that's portion size, all those things play a role in your sleep hygiene. Some folks are into napping, others not so much, but if you're thinking about doing it, typically mid to late afternoon is the best time to catch a cat nap. So anything from 20 minutes to maybe an hour is probably like the sweet spot, and probably don't want to push it past 90 minutes. I've had some students report back that they're doing like 3-hour naps, but that's because they're staying up really late. So again, the math is just like not adding up. It's not consistent. So naps are okay, but not super long, and it's all about timing. Again, you want to try to aim for a minimum of 7 hours of sleep. 8 hours is best. You know, obviously I know that can be very challenging for folks on different time zones trying to catch up, but still that's sort of just like a best practice for recommendations. Otherwise, having an alarm just to help with that scheduling, making sure you're not exercising too late into the evenings. Again, that gets your body full of energy when we want to be like winding down in the evenings. And a couple of suggestions. So we have there's something called Flux, and then also Sleep Cycle. So Sleep Cycle is just a smartphone app that I use as like a smart alarm that is able to sync to your sleep patterns. So it wakes you up in your lightest phase of sleep, which is nice. It's not waking you up in a really dark, deep phase of sleep. So definitely recommend that. And Flux is essentially just putting night mode settings on a PC computer. So very similar to what you would set on an iPhone, for example, but it's just for your computer. And I have to put a selfish plug in for our Refresh Sleep program. We actually host an email-based sleep intervention program, typically once a semester. The fall semester was totally out of whack, but we'll 100% absolutely kick that off in January. So I'll share that with the instructors for sure when that time comes. Yeah, feel free to keep using the chat if necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and keep moving forward. Oh, it looks like we have a question. Let's see. Question on the chat. Question: my friends are living in their hometown. They can't attend the meeting today. Okay. However, they have to wake up in the middle of the night every single day to attend class. Some of their professors still ask them to attend class because there's either no recording or they attend to the hard requirement. Yeah, so obviously some challenges for folks who, like Dr. Laura had said, having to wake up in the middle of the night to take a class, that's honestly got to be so difficult. Yeah, I mean, I think that literally does have, I would say personally that has more to do with like an infrastructure issue. And I think that, you know, maybe folks like myself and some other people within our respective areas, Emma and myself, could do a little bit more to be advocating for thinking about folks like you guys and your friends who are struggling with this. Because I mean, honestly, I think recording is the easiest thing to do, but I'll let, looks like Dr. Amaya wants to weigh in. That would be helpful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just kind of following on that question, Emma, I know that you work very closely with the students that are having kind of some of these issues. Any recommendations on what will be the first step students can take to address these issues with their professors? Maybe, I know that sometimes the students need a little bit of guidance on how to initiate those conversations. Any insight that you might have?
Yeah, I think one of the first steps is just seeing if open communication, if that's enough to reach out to the professor and see if they're willing to work with you, or see if they're willing to do a recording, like a password protected recording on T-Learn. And just to have that, right, just to reach out and just ask about the possibility. The professor may not know that this is a student living in a 12-hour time zone difference, and that can be really hard, right? If your class is at noon in San Antonio, it's at midnight in your home country, and it can be so hard to focus. So I would say, as a first step, reaching out to your professor through email and asking, is this a possibility? Can we work something out for me? I think if the response back from the professor is just not very flexible on being able to attend based on that, the next step I would recommend is maybe pulling in people like Dr. Rodriguez or Jesse and asking for maybe some support and advocacy from their office to see if they can communicate with the professor. And then, of course, knowing, kind of going up that tier, asking for support from either Dean Tuttle or Dr. Michael Soto, who's our Associate Vice President in Academic Affairs, that we are all here to help. And it can be really hard to reach out, right, and ask for that help because you think, oh, my situation is so different. I don't want to burden anyone or get special treatment, but that is not the case, right? It never hurts to ask and find out what the answer to that question is. If anything, it can be helpful to figure out, okay, what is my next step from here? So definitely reach out. Know that you have supports here at Trinity and that we want to support you. Even if you're in a completely different country, you're still here at Trinity, you're still with us.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate that. Yeah, so definitely let's keep the conversation going. Feel free to throw in any additional questions on the chat. Really glad you posed that question. It's an excellent question because these are real life, what we're dealing with right now challenges, and you have people in your corner. So I think that's the thing that's also really important, like Emma said. Our reach goes beyond our bubble at Trinity. That's 100% true. Sometimes we just have to be creative with problem solving and think a lot about advocacy and and making sure that our voice is heard. So this is a great way to just even start thinking about those things. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So moving forward, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but looking at physical activity in particular, obviously this is one thing that can be difficult to find motivation for at times, but the reward that you get for engaging in physical activity far outweighs the planning or far outweighs the motivation that is necessary or needed to be able to be active. So these are just some general recommendations and then just broken down by different types of physical activity. So we have aerobic activities versus anaerobic. So thinking about things like cardiovascular exercise versus strength training. So this just kind of explains the differences between those two. A lot of it also varies on intensity. So really with self-care, we just always say whatever exercise you're doing is great. So, and whatever intensity level works for you is also great. It's just a matter of making it a priority because it's a huge help for your health and wellness and self-care long-term. So so typically aerobic exercise ties in something with an ing at the end, walking, dancing, biking, etc., swimming. And then again, the anaerobic is muscle strengthening. So anything with weights or resistance bands. And a lot of times muscle strengthening activity, you don't even necessarily need to use any equipment for that. A lot of it can be body weight resistance, things of that nature. But if you have any questions about that, I can definitely take some time. You can email me and we can go over anything related to fitness or exercise for sure. Okay, looks like there's just a question on for housing in the chat for our facilitators. All right, perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, so next we're moving on to healthy eating and nutrition. So a little bit about what I'll cover here is focusing on the graphic just shows portion size examples, which can definitely be a major concern for our students and especially folks who haven't been used to this large scale campus dining model, for example. But a couple of tips and tricks to think about nutrition and food planning. Again, this is major cultural influences all over the world about people and their connections to food and fellowship, which is great. And it's always fun to explore variety and things like that. But just some general tips and tricks in this area specifically. So picking foods that are nutrient dense that will give you like a lot of power and energy is really important. So typically those are things that have protein, fiber, things like that will provide you long-term energy, things that won't make you have like a crash in the middle of the day, for example. So typically just incorporating a lot of veggies and thinking about a lot of these other things, thinking about how much you're having, so you can kind of double up on veggies, but maybe scale back on like regular carbohydrates, let's say, for example. So like your pasta and grains, you might not need as much of those if you fill yourself up on veggies first. And I know that a lot of other cultures besides American cultures do a much better job than we do of their veggie intake. But just some general reminders that we typically have to revisit with our domestic students. So I'm always just kind of preaching about that. Again, thinking about how foods are prepared. Just like I had mentioned with sleeping, it's really important to try to keep meal times spaced out in regular intervals. That's pretty key to make sure you're not too hungry and make sure you're not overeating. Working in some snacks, whatever those might be throughout the day. Sometimes it's just like fruit or fresh veg, obviously that's the best option. But whether it be low-fat dairy options like string cheese or anything like nuts or legumes, things like that can definitely provide some additional fuel and energy. But again, whatever works for you and whatever, those cultural ties to food might be, there's so many different options, of course. Always try to recommend some sort of breakfast or like a light meal in the morning to start your day, being aware of what's on your food labels and ingredients. It takes some time, energy, and practice with that. But once you get the hang of it, it actually comes pretty naturally. And another resource we have that we don't always utilize, but we have available is we do have a dietitian that we refer students out to if necessary. And you can connect with me if you need any help with some general food or nutrition consulting. But for high level, more specialty questions, we do have a dietitian that we can refer our students to as well. So definitely just another resource to let y'all know about that. All right, so this is kind of where I want to spend a good chunk of time here is looking at mental health specifically. So I'm just calling the stress management and more. So a lot of the remaining parts of the presentation today are looking at this area specifically. So overall, stress is just how our body is adapting to different demands in our environment, in the timeline that we have, depending upon what's going on. So we know that this can ebb and flow with our college students, whether it's finals, midterms. I mean, this is a really tough challenge for a lot of our students, like pandemic or no pandemic. So we are living in a totally different time where everything is just that much more heightened and escalated in terms of stressors that we have going on. So one thing that I do like to note with our college students specifically too, is we're not doing ourselves any favors if we're introducing other substances like nicotine, alcohol, or caffeine to help manage. We try to think about stress management a lot more holistically. There's a lot more things we can incorporate in our routine, a lot of people that we can talk to, a lot of resources and referrals that we can use. Again, so you're not just, we don't want, the thing with mental health, we don't want folks to suffer in silence. There's lots of things that can be helpful to you, but sometimes it's recognizing those signs and symptoms, but it's also having that power to say, and that self-efficacy to say, I'm losing it, I need helpers. And that is like, that's what we want to stress, I think, the most out of today's presentation. So yeah, and one thing that we do know, as I have worked in counseling for a couple of years, again, not specifically doing that, but with my colleagues, is a lot of our students have had mental health therapy prior to arriving at college. That's also very common. So I think the fact that the more we're talking about mental health and just saying, it's equally as important as our physical health is, I think we're making progress slowly but surely. All right, let's check on the chat here. Okay. Actually, I'll come back. Let's see. Is this a question for me, Laura? Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think I have posted the question. One of the questions that I get from some of our students, and sometimes the hesitation to seek mental health assistance, is the issue of privacy. Can you explain to our students what it means for their privacy to be protected. Either you, Emma, or Catherine, and how is that implemented at Trinity?
Sure.
Counseling center.
Yes, I think currently thinking about for students that may be on campus, for example, but would be taking advantage of counseling services, they actually have a HIPAA protected version of Zoom for the folks who are, again, in Texas and on campus. So that is a very special sort of setup and system that they have been able to implement for those students studying on campus. But I think I'll let Emma jump in to help out with our students who are off campus.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to add on that, when you see a counselor in counseling services or any counselor that you should see, counselors follow HIPAA, which means that that's all of your protected health information. So they talk about this word confidentiality. And what that means is that your information is not shared with anyone outside of your consent. So if you give permission for your counselor to share information, they can share that information with the person that you specify, but they will not share your information with anyone else, even if let's say your faculty advisor and they talked, I mean, they wouldn't even know that you're going to see them in counseling services. Same thing if you're seeing a counselor somewhere else. And so just like Catherine said, counselors at counseling services see students in the state of Texas, and that's who they see through HIPAA compliant Zoom. So even your Zoom call is protected because they really, really want to make sure that your privacy is protected and all of the information that you talk about is kept in that safe space. It will not be shared without your permission. And that's like a form that you fill out. That's how official it is. You have to sign and say, I give you permission to share my information. For those students that are maybe watching this recording later, or those students that are outside of the United States right now, because of licensing requirements, our counselors at Trinity can't see anyone that is currently residing outside of the state of Texas. And so I did compile a list of resources that I can share with you guys. I'll share it in the chat, and then I'll have Dr. Rodriguez or Jesse share it with you afterwards so that you can look at that to figure out how can I access counseling resources when I'm in my home country or in my hometown. And so that you can have access to that. Even though you're out of the country, we still want to make sure that you have that support as well. And again, any counselor you should be working with should follow privacy laws to make sure that your information and your privacy and everything you share is private, because sometimes it makes it easier to talk about mental health when you know, okay, my information is protected and they won't go telling all my secrets and all these things that are really hard for me to deal with. Your information is protected.
Great, thank you, Emma. Anything else on that? Dr. Laura, are we okay to move forward?
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
Okay, no problem. All right, so thinking a little bit more about how mental health ties into self-care specifically. So I've just kind of put one thing that we do in our office and student involvement is do climate checks. So thinking about what's going on in the world, what's going on politically, what's going on public health wise. Obviously I weigh in on that quite often. So I just kind of put in some ideas taken from that and put in some ideas that we've had just with this wild presidential election phase that we've been in here in the US. I kind of pulled some ideas from conversations that we've had about a lot of these things. So a lot of what I've written down here and added here is thinking about when we need to take a step back and remove ourselves from certain conversations or situations when they are becoming too hostile, too stressful, too overwhelming. Because I think those things obviously contribute to poor mental health and a lot of stress for our students. So some other tips, even saying things like, no, is just not a good time right now. So whether there's just a lot going on academically or personally, or just in the news, just again, being able to take that step back and think about, this is not the conversation I want to be having right now. And that is 100% okay to say these things. Self-preservation. So thinking about how can I put myself first to know, how can you take care of other people when you don't take care of yourself? And that's a lot of what this conversation is really all about. one thing, yeah, and I think giving yourself some space to transform, essentially that just means, you know, even with our students coming in as first year students and as they leave us 4 or 5 years later, whatever that timeline might look like, you come in as one person and you leave sometimes as somebody different. And a lot of your opinions change, a lot of your environment changes, right? So, and a lot of times, you know, even in the process of just a few short months, your opinions can change. So I think giving yourself and allowing yourself being able to say that it's okay to kind of transition into this new person, right? So yeah, so just some acknowledgement about that. Also some acknowledgement about just emotions and how those can play a role in your daily self-care routine and your daily, yeah, I mean, how it really impacts you all over the place, physically, academically, socially, right? All these things. So being able to acknowledge feelings when you just feel like you're at your max or you feel like you're stressed out, just, you know, being able to say that I'm frustrated, I just need to scream into a pillow, or I'm just upset and the only thing I want to do right now is cry. Whatever that is for you, it's okay to be in that space. It's not always going to last forever. It's just sometimes we just need a moment to ourselves to be able to think about where we're at and where we want to go. And that's really kind of all this slide is saying. But also there's a lot of support and tools out there to help you, yeah, not be in a certain place forever. So you don't, if you're feeling angry and upset, there's ways to process those emotions by turning them into something productive, let's say. So there's lots of different ways and things that we could be doing that with our self-care as I move through the next slides. And then the last thing here on the left-hand side there for me is student involvement. We'll be sharing a digital self-care toolkit very soon with our student leaders. So we have some resources that we pulled together and we're really excited to share. We're just getting ready to do that, so stay tuned. All right, so this is just kind of a holistic slide thinking about relaxation techniques as a whole. So some of these are just general things that you can do to wind down to help with your mental health and self-care. So don't necessarily need to go through the list here, but revisiting things that we kind of forget about sometimes or that we put on the back burner. So making sure that you're reaching out, making sure you're doing those FaceTime calls, engaging in pet therapy or exercise. Obviously people are, you know, a lot of conversations I'm having with colleagues is, what are you watching on Netflix right now? So continuing doing that, but finding some balance and moderation with other ways that, again, you can engage in your personal health and wellness, of course. So just a reminder, if you haven't revisited some of these things in a while, to consider them. So just a list, not an exhaustive list, but just a list I have. And this slide is called Relaxation Techniques Plus. So this is a little bit higher level wellness and self-care, let's say. So here are just some suggestions. We have something called guided imagery. So for folks who are a little bit into meditation or mindfulness or considering trying it out, excuse me, we have Headspace and Insight Timer are just two apps that we suggest to our students. Obviously, we also have our TU Fit Student Health and Wellness Organization that does a lot in this area. So if you folks are interested, they do fitness classes and they do meditation meetups. So feel free if you want to get on their email list. Not sure what their winter plans look like, but you can get ready for the spring semester if that's something that you're thinking about. There is something called a body scan, which is also formal term is progressive muscle relaxation. So for folks who have a little bit of a challenge with tense muscles or body fatigue, this is a great tool to use for folks who are either very physically active or maybe they have issues with chronic pain, things like that, where they just have a lot of tension in your physical self. So that's something that I highly recommend. There's definitely a lot of tools out there on YouTube and whatnot that you could try out. It's really just per preference. Then we have more, instead of physical, we have brain training or distraction techniques. So this is a nice option for folks who have experienced something traumatic. I mean, pretty much everyone has experienced something traumatic, I think, with being the times that we're in, but trying to refocus what what we spend a lot of time reflecting on what went wrong. So using distraction techniques to focus on what went right, or just think about going a different direction mentally to try to kind of put a positive spin on things. So again, a lot of ideas, tips and tricks there. Otherwise, we just have things, again, focusing on positive. So practicing gratitude, writing down a list of the things that you're really good at or that you're thankful for, helping others, volunteering. Obviously, we have a pretty substantial way to connect with our volunteer action council on campus, but there's so many options, I'm sure, in your local communities, or even digital and virtual ways to give back now. So just kind of giving back to other people really helps folks cheer them up and put them in a positive mood. And of course, we have journaling, which our folks in the Tiger Learning Commons know so much about. But yeah, and I'm sure you guys all have something that you do as well. So the last slide that I have here, just to wrap up, I know we're getting short on time, is sometimes it's not just a matter of having the content and the knowledge, and I'm sure like Miss Emma can speak to this as well, but it's really about what are our next steps and what plans do you want to put together to say, here's my time that I'm actually going to spend to dedicate to my health and self-care. So this is just like a SMART goal setting. Folks, you might have seen this before. A lot of different offices use it in different ways, but it works with health and wellness as well, I think. So picking out any of the, totally up to you, but just something to think about as we're moving into the holiday break and things of that nature is, what self-care goal do you really want to try to make a priority in this time that you have available? And then, thinking about short-term and long-term, what days of the week do you want to work on this goal? How often? Do you need a helper? Who at Trinity can help me with my goal? So, and thinking about what's going to get in my way of this. Do I let social media consume me? Do I get wrapped up into projects that are a little bit above my head? Am I in too many clubs? All these concerns we hear about so often with our students, but thinking about how do you take the content and knowledge and then make a plan out of it? How do you put those skills into practice? So just something that I walk through with our students with health coaching or even larger groups to figure out, okay, I have the info, but now what am I going to do? So this is how we do that. So definitely that's kind of all I have here, but available for questions or any other discussion as we wrap it up. And I can stop my screen share, whatever the folks want me to do.
Thank you, Catherine.
Sure.
So I guess we can go back, if you don't mind stopping the screen share. We have a few minutes to, of course, let us know if you have any more questions or if we missed your question. I think we can take the next 10 minutes just to share the space and to just talk to each other. So if you're able to, feel free to unmute yourself to maybe join the conversation. But something that I wanted to do also as part of this meeting was to go ahead and Catherine talked about practicing, was it, one was the distraction, kind of thinking about the positives, distraction technique. And so we also wanted to use this time to kind of celebrate the small accomplishments, the big accomplishments that you had this semester, kind of that practice of self-care. So anyone has any wins, as small as they can be, that you want to share, that you were able to accomplish this semester? I know that we have in our call several new students at Trinity who got here, were able to get to our campus, and this is their first semester. So, and we also have some of our veterans international students who are really involved on campus. So I'm sure it has been a very challenging semester, but what are some of the wins? What are some of the wins that we can celebrate today?
I have a win for kind of all of you guys being students in this really challenging semester, whether this is your first semester of college or whether you have a few under your belt, right? This is a completely brand new semester. I like to say this is probably your first time being a college student during a global pandemic, and hopefully, you know, it'll be your last very soon. It's a completely new type of learning, and you guys are here. We're a few weeks away from the end of the semester. And you know what? Whatever the outcome of grades at the end come December, you did it. You made it through the fall semester of 2020. And that is a win in and of itself. You are here every day working hard, going to classes, whether online or Tiger Flex, or for those of you watching the recording and maybe you're waking up in the middle of the night to do classes. I mean, that's a lot. This is a hard semester and you guys are here doing it. So definitely a win for all of you. You guys are rock stars for doing that, definitely.
Well said. I think that we have anyone else that want to share? Any questions that we might be able to answer for you as we go into the last few minutes of our meeting today?
So I have a question for the guys who are studying at Trinity here. So how do you connect with your families in your home countries? Like, do you need a lot of support from them, like, I don't know, mentally, emotionally? Or do you think you can handle everything by yourself? And how do you connect with them?
Well, for me, I set a schedule with them. I am free usually on Wednesday and Friday, so I usually call them right before they go to sleep around 9 a.m. Over here, which is 9 p.m. over there. And we talk for about an hour, and I just tell them my plan for the day and how everything has been going. Sometimes I just call them because I'm too stressful of my FYE paper too. So they're supportive parents, and they really gives me the motivation to carry this semester through. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Kevin. Yes, scheduling those calls or those conversations with family can be really a way to kind of, you know, feel closer to them and to receive that those you know, words of support that mean so much to us from our family. So great practice for students to establish that connection. Anybody else want to share with us how they keep connected with their friends and families and what that means to you in terms of your self-care?
Well, I know this is a luxury for you, but had you able to connect with any students on campus, especially for the new students? Were you able to make some friends in this new semester? or find some students that you guys can be a support for each other. Because I know that our office can do a lot, and Catherine and Emma's office can do a lot, but we cannot replace the peer support for you. Any of you have any good experience of friendships, peer supports?
Well, for me, I tried making some friends and it has been successful. Well, I guess that's a win. I now have a workout buddy that we go to the gym every 3 times a week, and we get along well. I also have the friends that usually play basketball with me every Friday night, and that's a great way to relieve stress. My sweetmate and I get along well, so I think that in terms of friendship, this semester has been pretty good for me.
It's great to hear that. And I know that several of you are also part of the IMentor program. And for Emma and Catherine, the IMentor program is an initiative from the ISSS. It's a peer mentoring program, and several of the students in the call right now are participating in that program. So there's another win, right? It's that connection that you were able to make, and just giving yourselves the time to participate in this type of initiatives and program, you know, helps please get you established at Trinity. Well, it's almost 6:30. Any last comments from our students or our facilitators before we you know, finish our call today?
I just wanted to say thank you guys for being here, and thank you for those watching at home. You know, thank you for joining in with us. I'm going to share with Dr. Rodriguez kind of a list of resources that I get asked about the most at Trinity. And so, you know, some of those like counseling services, there's the licensing requirement, but a lot of those services, probably the majority of them, are available to Trinity students, whether they're here in San Antonio or where they're in their home country. And so I'm going to share that so you guys have access to that. Sometimes what self-care looks like is asking for help. Sometimes that's the thing that can be best for us, and it's a really hard thing to do. But there are people here at Trinity support you in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's you need academic help. Sometimes you're trying to figure out something with financial aid. Sometimes it's mental health. And so I'll send that list over so you guys have a quick reference sheet of the email and the phone number that you can contact to get in touch with those offices. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you. And I see that some resources were shared, and also personal emails. So make sure to copy those before you know, we finalize our call. Those were great resources shared to you, and personal connections. So you have met Emma and you have met Catherine. Now you have put a name to the face, and hopefully you feel more comfortable reaching out to us on campus to help you with your needs. All right.
It was so great to see everybody. Thank you so much for having me and Emma.
Thank you.
Everyone
Hope
have
you
a
have a
great
relaxing
night.
break.
Thank you. And
Thank you for joining.
the recording, and know that we're here to help you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you, Emma and
Take
Catherine.
care.
Thank you for
Oh, no
having
worries. Bye, Jessie.
Bye.
See you later.
Have a great weekend.